Welcome back to Star Wars Minute. It's the daily podcast where we analyze, scrutinize, and celebrate the Star Wars movies 1 minute at a time. I'm Pete the Retailer from PeteTheRetailer.com.
They call me Alex Robinson from AlexRobinson.fun.
And I am Riley Silverman, and you can find me on Twitter at Riley J. Silverman, and I write for lots of websites.
That's true. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back again. We didn't ask you yesterday, so I'm glad you had an opening in your schedule to come back and talk to us about minute 78.
Well, that's why I'm in my ship, because I didn't have time to land, so I'm just flying. I'm currently in hyperspace right now. I'm sending you a hyperspace transmission.
Hands-free mode.
Yeah.
Hands-free.
It's Hans. It's pronounced Hans.
Hans-free.
Hans?
It's Frozen 2, which is Hans-free.
The minute 78 of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, starts with hand touching hand, reaching out, touching me, touching you.
It's pronounced Hans, touching Hans.
Frozen 3, Hans 2.
And it ends with the council has decided Rey is getting kicked off the island. So that's a reference that I'm making, not having. I've never seen an episode of Survivor, so it's like a type of thing where I make a reference. And I'm like, that's a thing, right? Right? People say something about a council and Rey, she got kicked off the island.
Survivor of all things,
right? Isn't that what happens?
That's what kids like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Show that started 20 years ago. Anyway, yes.
Okay. So
they touch hands.
Yeah.
Reaching out.
Touching
you. Touching me. Yeah.
And my first note for this is that this touching of hands is kind of more intimate and emotional than like any kiss that I can think of in Star Wars. Like, this is the most kind of loaded, just kind of like emotional moment in, there's a hard to, I know we joked. It wasn't really a joke, but we were talking about possibly the most emotional moment in certainly in Return of the Jedi is Malakili, but emotional moments are genuine emotional moments are rare in the Star Wars saga, and so for this to be, I feel this one. It's strong.
The level of acting happening in this minute is just beyond, like the dialogue-free just intensity between both these characters. And the fact that for half the scene or half the minute, they're not even in the same room together, it feels like, because Adam is clearly on the set of like the Dreadnought and well, not the Dreadnought, whatever Kylo's ship. Adam is clearly on that set, and Rey is at the act, and then they obviously moved him to the Acto set, but like the fact that they're both just like this intensity and like the single tear coming down Rey's face, and like that might have been hokey if the acting wasn't meeting it. Like if that was as an effect of having this one tear come down, that might have been like, all right, you're milking it a little bit. But because Daisy and Adam are both just so good at acting that like it's just, and this is actually for me a really solid example of how Ryan is a much better director for actors than perhaps some previous directors have been in this saga, in that like you're getting these moments that I think like I would like to have seen how this level of directing could have played in some previous scenes with acting, and without I don't want to I feel really guilty about a lot of the mean things I've said about prequels in the past on this show.
Same.
So I'm trying to be kinder about it. But one thing that I definitely think there's moments in the prequels where better acting direction would have served the script, even as written, a lot more strongly. And I think this is a really good example of that kind of moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Apply this same, not that it's a formula, but apply the same hand to any kind of, Anakin and Padme stuff. And I think you would have had you by all means should have had kind of moments that are more touching and meaningful than not to belittle this, but this, you should have these moments. That's the crux of the saga, leans more on those minutes. So it would be interesting to see that in different hands. Alex, you seem confused.
No, I was totally agreeing with everything everyone's saying.
Well, when you said the hands, I'll let Alex say, because sorry to interrupt you, Alex. When you said I would like to have seen these hands. You meant metaphorically, like in the hands of this filmmaker, but I thought you literally meant the hands, like this scene, like so you want to see exactly the hand reaching out. So I got very confused for a second, but now I'm done. Sorry, Alex, because I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I totally agree that this is a very Rian Johnson himself said that this is probably the closest that they'll ever get to a sex scene in a Star Wars movie.
Right.
And it makes sense because, like we said, Star Wars is generally a pretty chaste universe where, Han and Leia kiss, and then that means they are, of course, together for the rest of their lives, or at least, it's implied that, that they are now in love with each other. And I remember thinking, even when I saw this, that there was a nice bit of ring theory-ish, like the forbidden love aspect of Padme and Anakin was never really like when Obi-Wan fought, like you could easily imagine this scene being, instead of Luke, Rey, and Kylo, being Padme, Anakin, and Obi-Wan fighting out about their relationship. When he finds out about it, it's just kind of like, oh, like, I've had the worst day already. I don't need to know about this,
Yeah.
But this is clearly like, it has a very operatic kind of like Romeo and Juliet, like, no, this is, exactly what's not supposed to be happening kind of feel to it. And You're right. It definitely, despite the operatic, sometimes emotions of the prequels in terms of their relationship, it never really had the feeling of like a big they were good at keeping it secret, so there wasn't a lot of like it wasn't a the reveal was not as big of a plot point as it could have been.
Well, I think it also is undercut by the fact that the second movie ends with the marriage, and then the third movie, they're not together throughout most of the movie, and then it comes together at the end. So we don't see them dealing with it as a secret. I think there is, I will say, to the credit of the Clone Wars series, that does come into play a little bit more often in the Clone Wars series. Although even in the series, Anakin's not on Coruscant, like he and Padme are separated by lots of distance, but there are like these moments on that show where Anakin is sending these like clandestine transmissions to Padme that like Rex, the like clone trooper, is like helping him with a little bit. So like Rex is in on the secret, and there is like an implication that Obi-Wan is in, like not in on it, like he's been let in, but he's figured it out. There's a moment where so like they build on that, but I don't think that has a lot of real estate in the story, considering how important that element is. And I think you're right. Like moments like this, that's kind of like almost like a tryst between these two characters that gets interrupted. And I'm saying that as someone who's not even a Reylo shipper, but even if you take out romance from this as a read, it's still this connection that they have, and this driving force that they are having this clandestine meetup with, because they are enemies. They're on opposite sides of this war right now, and so to have this really illicit like moment that they're having that's interrupted by her master and the betrayer of Kylo. There's a whole lot happening in this 1 minute.
I not to go back and again, we're not piling on the prequels. I also feel kind of, I want to let people enjoy what they enjoy, but kind of compare, that kind of fireplace scene in which one was that? Attack of the Clones? Yeah. Where, like so many, it's like the decoration is all romantic. It's like they're by a fireplace, and she was even wearing a very kind of, revealing and leathery kind of, outfit, and it's supposed to be this intimate moment, and then it's like it doesn't fire because they're not connecting as well. And part of that is, directing the actors, and part of that is also just kind of the way that the, cinematically, the way that it's kind of laid out. And so it's an interesting comparison that you can get so much more out of this connection. And it's also very again, not to cross not to bring it back to the neutral zone, but it's very Vulcan. The Vulcan concept of closeness and romance relies heavily on hands, touching hands, and fingers and stuff like that.
And this is, again, going back to the acting, too, is that it is extremely hard to be this evocative in acting without any dialogue and without, like, big body motions and stuff like that. Like, so this is all facial expressions. This is all, like, longing stares. So even, not even comparing it to any other films, this is a moment that could have easily been very, very undercut by acting choices or by directing choices. So it is one of those moments where it's just really good. It's a highly skilled filmmaker and two highly skilled actors coming together with a moment that just luckily converged in a perfect way. I think that it's a mark of everybody involved that it landed the way that it did, because I think that it easily could have not landed and would have been kind of just this forgettable moment, but instead it's very strong. And I mean, obviously we're watching it isolated in 1 minute, but out of all the minutes this week, the intensity of this 1 minute is bananas.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, and even the little I think in theory sounds like it could have been terrible, but there's that really big close up of their fingers, and then when you see them touch, you hear like a distant thunder clap at the same time, and that could easily be something that could be overdone. But they do a good job of keeping it.
Frau Blücher.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, Riley, I wanted to ask you yesterday. You mentioned that you'd written romantic comedy scripts, and you brought up the idea of tropes, romantic comedy tropes.
Sure.
Does Kylo Ren fall into the trope of the bad boy who, like, is he the Nelson Muntz to raise Lisa Simpson? Like,
I think there's a pretty generous read for that. Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think you could easily make that case. I think that if you, especially even if you're not a hardcore Reylo shipper, I'm not, because I really like the idea of Rey being her own person and not being tied to a male character as a romantic interest. Mm-hmm. But that's why I'm not a shipper. It's not because I don't think there's text there for it. I think it's just that's not my preference. But I think that absolutely Rey and Kylo fall into the enemies into lovers trope of romantic writing and romantic character developments. And I think that, yeah, absolutely, Kylo is like the bad boy that can be changed.
The Danny Zuko.
Yeah. I think it's a really good, yeah. I think that's a very easy read to make, absolutely.
It would have been interesting if they had gone that direction, and instead of having Kylo Ren become a good guy, that she would become a bad guy, the way that Sandy becomes a greaser at the end of...
Well, okay, I don't want to get too deep into Grease, but if you actually, like, her lyrics are like, hey, I can meet you halfway, but you also have to shape up. I'm tired of waiting for you to be in
and stuff, but
yeah.
Really,
what's that?
Come on. He joins the track team, I know, and starts, like,
yeah, they both change for each other.
And stuff. But in the end, she's dressed like a greaser, and he's dressed... It's not like he's wearing...
Right, but she sings a song to him that is like, you better shape up, because I need a man, and my heart is set on you, and I have to be with you, so you better shape... Like, the song is literally, you better shape up, not, I changed for you. So it's very much her saying, this is how I... Yeah, it's a meet halfway. Anyway, that's... you can tell I've had this argument about Grease a lot in my life, so... and then, although there is definitely Grease 2, where there's, like, the gender... Yeah. Well... She did have a car, or he had a car. It was Grease Lightning. But
right. They do flip it in Grease too. She's the woman is the Michelle Pfeiffer is the bad girl.
Right.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine in his, again, I don't want to sound like I'm dunking on prequels again, because I'm not. And actually, I will say, I want to just say, by the way, for the fans of this podcast, that I actually think that the fans of this podcast really helped me to change my mind on the prequels, and really helped me to appreciate them. Not just, like, to some degree, when I was still really more active on Facebook and in the Facebook groups for it, and also the memes. I think the prequel memes alone made me really enjoy and have fun with the prequels. But I think a lot of people who grew up with them and they mean a lot to, helped me to understand that I wasn't seeing them the proper way. And I they're never going to be my favorite movies in the saga, but I do appreciate them more than I used to. But the reason why I bring that up is a friend of mine recently said that in his mind, if he had to rewrite the prequels, he would make Padme another Jedi, and then, like, the tragedy, the romance of Anakin and Padme would be that, like, these two Jedi fell in love, but they can't be together because of the Jedi tenets about attachment and stuff like that. And, like, that would be a little bit more of a star-crossed lover kind of vibe, which they're kind of doing in the High Republic books now. But and I think the reason why I bring that up is I think that's kind of what's happening here now. Is if you do want to read the romantic relationship into it with Kylo and Rey, there's this element of, like, there's an attraction. There's this intense force-fueled connection between these two characters, and as a result, like, it amplifies the danger to them both having, like, Rey does have the potential of falling to the dark side because of this connection, just as much as Kylo has the potential of rising to the light, which we do see kind of play out as a possible fantasy or another dark side vision in the next film.
Right. Which I know, not to... not to get too extra textual with it, but the you kind of knew that they couldn't the goodwill that they had kind of to use the phrase engendered, but the in getting that kind of like, oh, we have this hero that little girls love, like seeing all like the little girls dressed as Rey and all that, like you kind of knew that they couldn't really do that kind of dip into the dark side arc without sacrificing some of that, without ruining some kids' lives. And I think that was a very kind of cautious that they could tease that a little bit, just have it in a vision for a second, because they knew that that's what a lot of the adult fans were kind of interested in, that arc. But I think they knew there was no way that they were going to go have her turn even for a little bit, I feel like, because it would they knew what they had. But
I think even narratively, because you're dealing with just like, it works for the prequels because it's the beginning of a saga, and the prequels, it works for Anakin and the prequels because we already have the original trilogy and we know how this story plays out. I think for this one, if you're not intending to tell a whole second trilogy after this one, or I guess fourth trilogy in this case, but like having Rey turn to the dark side this late into the story would be really tough narratively, because then you have to spend like a whole film trying to fix it, or you're ending your story in a way where you're like, wait, narratively that's not very satisfying. So I think even outside of the audience perspective, I think just from a storytelling perspective, it would have been really tough to do.
It's interesting to imagine, because if the prequels had been done first, and you can imagine the people's outrage when the hero of the story turns out to betray everyone and murder a room full of children or whatnot. And then you can also imagine the outrage when, if like 20 years later, George Lucas is like, okay, now I can finally tell what's going to happen, where Darth Vader becomes a good guy. Everyone would be like, what? And he could argue, I always intended that to be the case, but no one would believe him. They're like, you had a murder a room full of children, and because you knew that one day he'd turn back into a good guy. So yeah, that would be an interesting. So it would be interesting if they had Rey turn to the dark side and then waited like 10 years and then said, okay, now here's the next episode where she becomes possibly good again, if that would even work.
Yeah.
Kind of retconning.
Well, luckily, instead, they made a series of films that was universally agreed to be loved upon, and nobody had any problems with whatsoever.
Exactly.
That's true. The end.
Although I always say that they can't do that, but I'm always, I think I said it in a different episode. Like if Hulk Hogan could join the NWO, and if Bailey can turn bad, then anybody can turn evil. But luckily, the rest of the world isn't wrestling.
I think it's harder for a limited film series versus a wrestling thing where the storyline can go on over the course of a year. Right. I think you could easily have a plot of Rey touching the dark side, but it would have to be more like a Clone Wars type animated series where it can play out over the course of like several seasons and kind of go on. And like I think that's why you can have stuff like that happen in animated show, not animated specifically, but like in serialized television.
Yeah.
So right. I think that was how it would have to play out. We'd have to have if they could get a dump truck full of money big enough to bring Daisy Ridley back to this franchise and get her to do a 10-part Disney Plus series. Like, that's how they could do that. But I think that if you have to wait, if you have to squeeze it into 3 films, it'll be very tough to do.
Right. So I think she would be down to do it. But I don't think she would be. I think you couldn't get Adam Driver to do it for less than a dump truck. But
yeah.
And Adam Driver would want the dump truck too. I think he'd be like, "All right, I'll take the money and the dump truck." Because
he's that kind of guy.
He seems like the type of guy who would want. There's like that's a cool dump truck.
That'd be in his writer for sure.
I kind of like the idea of him being like the Harrison Ford. Like when he does come back, it's grudgingly. And
yeah.
But everyone still loves it because the Star Wars fans have that masochistic streak where
I definitely
put up
am
with
very
anything Harrison Ford says.
I'm never not amused by when nerds ask Harrison Ford questions that they think he's going to give them the answer. Like, and this is not going to go the way you think. Right. The amount of times where he's not going to say something they want to hear, but they don't seem to know that. Like they're not setting themselves up to get the funny Harrison Ford I don't care answer. They're like, what do you think about this? And it's never not funny to me when he gives them the very Harrison Ford response to it. Yeah. But because of that, and because of the fact that Harrison Ford at one point, I don't think you could have gotten Harrison Ford to come back for Star Wars in the 90s. I don't think you could have gotten a comeback or early on in the 2000s. I think it took a lot to get him to come back for this and for Force Awakens. I mean, and I think that's why, like, knowing right now that Driver and everybody else won't come back right now, I do often fantasize about what's going to be the Star Wars story in 20, 30 years when these actors all finally are like, yeah, I'll come back. I need to like pay off some of my taxes for this year or something. Like, what's gonna be the story that does get all these people to come back, and will there actually, because there's such a different setup between George Lucas coming back and making prequels in the 2000s and the 99 and onward versus whatever's going to be happening with Disney making Star Wars moving forward because of all the Disney Plus we're having and the things like and new movies. We don't know what era Rogue Squadron is going to be set in and things like that. So will there, like, it won't be the same situation. So I do wonder, will there be a new saga trilogy in like 20 years that they are able to get the older versions of these actors to come back and play their older characters or not? Or are we going to say Rogue Squadron's already set 50 years past this and we're not going to revisit that era again? Who knows? So.
Why?
No.
Call me naive, but I don't think, well, at least with Harrison Ford, I can totally see it's not about money at all, because he's got, what does he need more? He flies his own private plane to his private house where he has
but he wrecks them
Jimmy
and he has to
Buffett
pay
and
for
the
new ones.
president or whatever. So
yeah,
he has Kleenex planes. He just crashes one, pulls another one out of the box.
Yeah,
ready to
but
go.
I think that was more just like, to a certain extent, him just being like, all right, let me tie up these loose ends with a lot of these characters so people stop asking me about them, essentially. Or just kind of getting past the point where it's just like, I'm not. I think he finally felt like, all right, I'm outside of the shadow of Han Solo now. Like, it's not a thing, like I can be, I can go back and do this and not have it be, not worry about it kind of defining me anymore. Whereas, I feel like, all these actors are going to go out and kind of make their bones and do more things and hopefully become known for other roles for a while, and then I think there will be a certain kind of nostalgia / kind of thing to kind of get them back together down the road, at least some of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of to do your version of the neutral zone with Star Trek. In the Doctor Who fandom, Christopher Eccleston left the show after his first season in very acrimonious ways, and it was a big thing. But he actually just, like, literally this week released his first in a series of audio dramas for Doctor Who. And over the last couple of years, he's, like, really made peace with the fandom and, like, really appreciates the fans and is doing cons and stuff like that. So I definitely think there's a chance where the fan appreciation over the course, if it can calm down a little bit and be a little bit kinder over the next couple of decades, I think there is definitely going to be like an era, not unlike what we're seeing now with Hayden, where I think the fandom is being a lot kinder and more accepting of Hayden now. Like, I remember when Hayden went to Disneyland, I missed Hayden at Disneyland by a day. By the way, I was there the day before he went, or the day after, I can't remember, but I was like upset. And as someone who has talked so much trash about the prequels in the past, the fact that I was actually really bummed that I didn't get to be at Galaxy's Edge the day that Darth Vader was there was like really a thing. And so I think as the fandom has a little more distance and is able to be a little bit more at peace with these actors, I think that there will be possibly them having like a reconciliation with it as well. But who knows? I think Harrison coming back for Rise had a lot to do with Carrie dying. I think that it was probably like, hey, we really wanted to have this moment with her. We're not going to get to have it. We really would really appreciate if you come back, and kind of that way it still has the emotional oomph that it should have. So I bet you, I imagine he probably did that scene mostly out of respect for Carrie.
Yeah, right. I could see that.
Well, stepping back into the minute for a second, I have a question.
Yeah.
No, that's why we're here. When Luke busts in and says, "What's that noise?" No, when Luke busts in to the room, does he really see Kylo Ren? Now, we switch back and forth to what looks like his POV of Rey and Kylo sitting there, but like, how much of that is he actually seeing? Is he sensing it? Is he seeing Rey sitting there and sensing that Kylo Ren is there? Or is he seeing Rey and Kylo Ren both sitting by the fire in that hut?
I think it's kind of 6 one way, half dozen the other. I think it's like, that's how, with the Force being at play here, like, how much is it your actual physical senses and how much is it you being so attuned to the Force? Like, I don't know if like there's definitely a solid line between those two things. I think he's definitely very, very aware that Kylo is there and that Rey is talking to Kylo, because why else would you blow a hole in the side of the house if you don't have that sensation? I'd love to hear your the Force doesn't exist practical explanation for what happened to the side of the house in this scene if it's not what's happening. But
it's that shoddy caretaker construction.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's I don't know if you've seen any of the behind the scenes stuff, but this is like a practical effect where they built this hut and all the rocks are on wires that get pulled back. So this is literally a case where Luke could have built this hut specifically with all those wires, knowing that at some point he might have to break into it. So that one we see, we have video evidence of that one. So, all the huts
that's like saying that Luke built his entire island with a green screen around it so that he can make different effects happen. Oh, it's not really even raining. Luke built a bunch of rain effects into the ceiling of this set so that he could pull it down.
Here's just above the top of the screen, you see there's caretakers. One has a little sprinkler can and one has a little sheet of sheet metal rattling
thunder
it.
sheet.
Oh my gosh.
So I did want to comment on, do you like that effect of that house blowing apart like that? I think it looks super cool, and yeah, that's it. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, that recently kind of came back up. I think was it in one of the documentaries or something, but it recently made the rounds. And Rian Johnson posted himself or somebody did. Somebody posted a thing with that kind of behind the scenes shot of them kind of setting it up and doing that. That was a test too. It was like a wasn't even the final cut. They were like, all right, we've got to build this all up and see how it looks when we pull it apart, and then set it all up and do it again, which was pretty incredible.
It's like the story of Everest. By the way, I think that answers the question of, is Luke still at all attuned to the Force? Like, obviously, in this moment, there's definitely some Force involving Luke.
Charges it back up. So, so to answer your question, Pete, I think he does see him, but I think, like Riley said, him seeing him there does not mean your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Like if you had said to Luke, yeah, I really thought he was there, I think Luke would have said, yes, I thought he was in the room with. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I do think, we do know from the next film that the dyad in the Force does allow for actual physical connection between spaces, since we see objects transfer between the two of them as they do dyad stuff. So I think if this is getting stronger and stronger as it goes, this might be the first time that there's actually a bridge connection. So anyone who is Force sensitive enough to be aware of the other's presence would be able to see them there.
Right.
I feel like Rey should be all like, Dad, you're embarrassing me. Breaking into his daughter's, what's going on in here? The door should be open at all times.
I don't like closed doors on my island.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like closed X-Wing doors on my X-Wings on my island.
And we don't know what Luke. I was wondering if this was Luke's sleepwear. Was he sleeping and he woke up and this happened, or was he just did he get dressed and then come out?
Drunkenly watching TV.
You think that's what it was? He hanging out with the caretakers.
I mean, do you think Luke's pajamas are his old black Jedi robes? It looks pretty much like he has a belt on and everything.
It's probably T-shirts. He probably wears it for a while, and then once it got all stretched out, he just wears it. That's probably literally the same outfit he was wearing. It's all has stains on it. No, I just don't have the sentiment to throw it away. I just want to keep it every now.
This little spot here is where Grogu spit up on my shoulder one time.
Right.
He sadly tries to put it on and realizes he can't close the belt anymore.
He has carved 2 new notches in the belt.
Right.
Been there, Luke. Been there.
No, wait. What does? I imagine, what do people sleep in if they're not does he have a nightgown? You think like a Scrooge style?
Yeah.
Why is Scrooge my go-to for a night? But I don't know.
Carrying.
Well, when we get to the next minute, we'll see what Kylo is sleeping in, right? So we'll be able to kind of extrapolate from that.
Right.
I do like the idea of Luke having a little stocking cap. And,
totally.
You there? Buy me a big fat Ronto, the biggest in the shop.
Right. It's Boonta Eve.
It's Life Day Eve, sir.
My last note just is this island now, because he says that you have to leave this island now, and then that of course got the Mermayo's song from the Star Wars Holiday Special in my head, this island now, this island now. I went instantly flashback to being 6 and watching that on Betamax.
Wow. you think Luke was quoting that when he said it?
Yeah. It's like, come on, you guys don't know that song, Mermea. She was huge in 6
It's like
ABY.
saying, hit the road, Jack, like that kind of.
Right, yeah.
Well, I guess that'll wrap up minute 78.
Yeah, did anybody else have anything else specific to this minute? We kind of get the aftermath of this. Shifts gears a little bit tomorrow. Can you come back tomorrow, Riley?
Yeah, I think so. I can land the ship by then.
All right.
Yeah, I think this minute, I think the second half with the wall blowing up is pretty big, but it is, like I said, to just kind of like really stick the landing on that intensity of the emotions and the hand reaching out. It says a lot that in this 1 minute, the first 30 seconds is as intense as the second 30 seconds, even though one is just two people sitting in a room looking at each other and holding their hands out, and one is a man blowing a wall off the side of a hut on his island. So
yeah, it's hard to see where they could have gone. Like, how do you follow up that scene without either you cut away to something else going on, either you cut away from that touch to the space battle to just totally shift gears, or like if you're going to stay here, you have to. Ending with a big explosion is a pretty good way to end things on that.
Yeah.
Well, pretty good way to. Let's see. Pretty good way to end the week would be to go to StarWarsMinute.com/Patreon and support us over there, and you can get more episodes. It's like the week never ends. You could have Alex and I in your ears every day, 8 days a week. We got a Saturday show, we got a Sunday show. We're always here. And we'll be back here tomorrow for a brand new episode of Star Wars Minute.
Star Wars Minute.